Over the last 4 years, I've come to see the power and the beauty of mess. I mean, I know on the surface that's an odd statement because mess is mess. There's nothing pretty or appealing about it. And even its very definition doesn't lend itself to anything powerful or beautiful. I mean, mess, a dirty or untidy state of things or of a place, a situation, or a state of affairs that's confusing or full of difficulties. There's nothing beautiful or powerful that even sits in the soul of that definition. Based on it, I mean, who would want to ever embrace mess? I know I didn't because I've spent my entire life trying to run away from it. And I'm not talking about running away from a messy bathroom or a restaurant for the sake of one's health. Mess associated with sanitary conditions, no matter what, should always be run away from. The mess that I'm talking about is the kind which exists in our own lives, circumstances, and the people around us. You know, if I'm honest with myself, my predisposition is to gravitate towards unmessy things, towards situations and people when they are the cleanest, the shiniest, the most ideal. That's how I want it. And at a calculated risk of making a fool of myself, I would assume that's how you want it too. But over the last few years, a set of experiences have caused me to really transform my attitude about mess. As a result, I no longer believe that it should be run away from. No. Instead, mess should be run towards and embraced. As a result of these experiences, I've found that I've redefined my definition of mess to a dirty or untidy state of things or of a place. Here's the difference: that's necessary for real power and beauty to emerge. You know, initially, this was a very sobering attitude adjustment. Mess being necessary for power and beauty to emerge. I mean, because if it was true, it meant that prior to embracing this new understanding, many powerful things didn't come to life or were delayed because I ran away from mess. Countless relationships with infinitely beautiful potential have ended or were never entered into because I ran away from people because they became or started being messy. You know, as I thought about these profound questions, I started to wonder, what would our world look like if we intentionally ran towards mess and embraced it? Essentially, if we push back on our predisposition to build, create, connect, when the terms and conditions are perfect. Okay, so let me tell you a story that will hopefully show you the kind of power and beauty that comes from running towards and genuinely embracing mess. In 2012, my co-founder and I started a volunteer program where we were attempting to introduce some local elementary kids to software coding. Now, I had thought about doing this before and figured the most ideal place to implement this plan was at a school with state-of-the-art equipment and filled with students eager to step into my cool world and become the next Steve Jobs. Well, that's not what I got. Instead, I got, or I should say we got, a school that was poor in resources and where 85% of the students lived in poverty and 20 to 25% were homeless. We got a school and students who were struggling just to do basic things like to breathe and eat, to be safe. this situation had to be a mistake because I personally needed, better yet, requested a pathway that was straight and clean, not messy. See, during this time, my life was also experiencing its own mess because I was running a fledgling startup that was causing me to rapidly accumulate those entrepreneurial experiences that were centered around intense personal poverty and instability. I wasn't looking for more mess, but instead I was looking for less. I was looking to wash away the mess that I felt when I would spend days in the aisles of Publix trying to calculate on my phone how many eggs, sweet potatoes, ramen noodles I could purchase for $10. I was looking to perfume the smell of the mess that was inducing a constant fear of being kicked out of my apartment because I didn't have enough money to pay rent. I was looking to shovel away any mess that was causing me to fall daily onto my knees and lament at the edge of my bed. Oh God. I am so weary. Help me prevail. Please do not refuse me before I die. I'm not asking you for riches, but confidence in knowing that I will receive my daily bread. All I know is that I fear that if I stay in this mess, I may dishonor you and all of those who've helped me. Yeah. I needed less mess so that I could focus on building my startup, which was written about by leading tech blogs and selected by one of the top accelerators in the world and destined to bring order to chaotic consumer data for thousands of companies. For me, this was the real beauty and power. Not this, a school struggling to take its last breath and 14 students struggling to take their first. But that was the situation. A messy school and students who were dropped into my lap and I was told to embrace. And the only way I could was by convincing myself that this is a very short assignment, that I would do it for a year, get a pat on my back when it was all over. Yep, you're a cool guy, Kyle. Good job. And then move on to where I belong. Greener pastures and tech glory. Well, from the very first day that I walked through those school doors, I immediately felt the weight of trying to create a coding program in such poverty. Frankly, I initially struggled with it. I felt disconnected with the process. And even worse, the student eyes would glaze over whenever I talked about software coding and the future it provided. I mean, it became apparent that this program, based in its current direction, was destined to fail because I was too busy focused on cleaning up my own mess and had placed conditions on the program and students that were stifling, unloving. This continued on for quite a few days. Then one morning, I ran across a piece of scripture that convinced and transformed my posturing in this whole situation. And whoever will be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Whew. After digesting that, I finally made the decision to let go of all of my own mess and embrace the role of servant, declaring out loud, I'm going to step down into the mess and authentically serve you, not on my terms, but based on your current realities, which are messy, ugly, broken, not perfect. Prior to this declaration, I only wanted to do life, this program, on my terms. My terms required the school to have state-of-the-art classrooms with brand new Mac machines and the latest coding software installed. My terms required the students to be well-adjusted and come from stable and supportive homes that allowed them to work carefree and diligently on their projects. My terms were not the reality. The reality was a 7-year-old whose home lives were in chaos. 9-year-olds who were hungry at night. 10-year-olds who were raising themselves because their parents had to work 2 or 3 jobs. The reality was kids who faithfully carried the cross of their burdens over the threshold of the classroom every day, who sat paralyzed because the weight was too much for them to bear. The reality was pure, authentic, unfiltered, just mess. And the realness was 1,000 times greater because I was intimately familiar with their life circumstances. See, I knew what it felt like to have to carry that cross. I knew what it felt like to be hungry. I knew what it felt like to live in fear of coming home and finding an eviction notice taped to the door. I knew their mess and the forces that they were fighting against. But to have any real impact, I had to serve them totally without being concerned about who's serving me. So I ran towards them and embraced. See, this change in attitude allowed me to finally understand that although software coding is cool and provided a way out for these kids, they couldn't see that. I mean, think about it. How can anyone see potential in the future if they're too busy fighting to live in the now? So the reality was, software coding wasn't even powerful enough to lift the tremendous weight of the burdens they carried so they could stand up and see. It just wasn't strong enough to grab hold of minds that were locked in an epic battle with an enemy that thrusted a sword called hunger and held its ground with a shield called insecurity. The only thing that had the power to fight this type of enemy was something simple and ancient. It was something that possessed the power to tear down and build up nations, the strength to catapult the iron vaults of wisdom, knowledge, and religion across the arc of time. That's something I realized was storytelling. See, in the midst of embracing their struggle, my eyes opened and my mind focused enough to understand that storytelling was the one force powerful enough to pull these kids from underneath the weight of their cross, finally freeing them to tell their story and experience the excitement of wanting to learn code so that they could scream their story to life and share it visually with the world. Storytelling and software coding gave them power and new freedom. And it was only because I stopped focusing on my terms and conditions and instead chose to intentionally run towards and embrace their mess. See, when I think about it, we had married software coding to storytelling, and the seed that this union produced dropped down into that messy but rich soil, and what grew in that fertile ground came up underneath and lifted those children up, giving them an unobstructed view of their potential in the future. So, what came out of running towards and meeting these children in the mess? I think two things. One, we got 14 previously unexcited kids excited about coding, and one to continue coding after the program ended. Now, okay, well, that's actually not a lot, but that's still one kid and possibly 13 more who now have a greater potential of stepping into technology roles that companies are struggling to fill. Because previously it was zero. And the reason why is because these kids were too busy focusing on now versus the future. So if combining storytelling and software coding could have this kind of impact on 14 kids, imagine the impact that it could have on 100,000. That's potentially over 7,000 previously unexcited kids now learning how to code because of storytelling. Companies could essentially solve their diversity problems not by throwing computers and cool coding programs and the right gamification at disadvantaged kids from their office, but by simply stepping out of the office and into the mess and using coding as a tool to help free inner city kids from their mess by giving them the power to express themselves through old-fashioned storytelling. Second, every once in a while, I, a founder of a company that serves thousands of kids, bump into one of the parents of those 14 kids that we taught. And oddly, it's always when I'm pulling around a shopping cart full of food at Publix, the very place I used to sit in the aisles and try to figure out how to eat. Those parents always run up to me and they say, "Thank you." My reply is always the same: "You're welcome, but thank you." See, there's an old Jewish midrash that goes, in heaven and in hell, there are tables piled high with delicious food, but no one can bend their elbows to eat. In heaven, well, actually in hell, everyone starves because they are too busy trying to feed themselves. In heaven, everyone feasts because they feed each other. You get it? The reality is that we're all messy. There are times when you and I can't feed ourselves because our elbows just don't bend. And that's life. And the way to keep ourselves from starving is not by drawing into ourselves. Instead, we should run towards and embrace each other so that we can feast. See, mess gives us a very unique opportunity to serve each other, not with bland food, but with delicious food. That's the power and beauty of mess. When you mourn, I mourn. When you're in pain, I cry. When you celebrate, I cheer. When we're hungry, we stand up and feed each other. So I ask again, what would the world look like if we intentionally ran towards mess and embraced it? Thank you.